everyone. You've tuned into another segment of our Business and Tech Talks discussions. I'm your host, the tour guide, Jenna Karasawa, for August 17th, 2022. At any point in time you're consuming this content, I can only hope you're doing well, and thank you for spending your valuable time with us. So today it's going to be a pretty extensive lineup. I've got 4 segments here, and I'll try to get through it as quickly as possible. And I'll have the blog also attached here. A lot of good information and good content. So let me go ahead and just kind of backtrack a little bit. We talked last week about the Crown Act, and that is a law that was passed in California back in 2019. So I want to follow up on that and go into a little bit more detail. In addition, we're going to talk about the Proverbs 31 woman, but more specifically about working women and the issues around that. And then the Industrial Revolution, reversing the damage done to society with that, and then always some type of solution and resolution. So let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. So we talked about the California Crown Act, and I don't know if you guys remember what that stands for, the acronym. So let me go ahead and pull that up because I honestly don't remember what it stands for. It's pretty sad. But it was specifically talking about creating a safe environment where we can, embrace natural hair in a professional setting. Unfortunately, our history has, a lot of mistakes, and a lot of people of color has been specifically disenfranchised due to their hairstyle choices. We have specific hair, and it hasn't been recognized or acknowledged, or there's been consequences for not having a certain professional look. So this law protects people of color with a kinky, curly, ethnic look. It gives them protection. They can take it up to government officials if it gets to the point of discrimination. So I shared originally that I was not in favor of that because I felt that we needed to help handle the problems in-house as opposed to going to the public officials and suing people, taking them to court. My argument was just the solution, pretty much band together, find a way to, I guess you would call it, band together. I don't want to call it a revolt, a revolution, but essentially that's what you have to do. Like, you have to organize and say, hey, we're going to support African Americans, people of ethnic origins, black people, come together. So it stands for create, it's the C, create a respectful and open world for natural hair. And that was passed in 2019. I believe California is the only state that has that on its law books currently, and other states are possibly considering it. So what does that have to do today with our business and tech talks discussion? Why bring that up again? Well, it goes a little bit deeper aside from just the hair, and me, we all wish this wasn't an issue, but let's just be real, it is. This is not the only way that they've kept people of color disenfranchised, so I just wanted to just jump right in. Let's just be honest and upfront. Most people in modern day society in 2022 are not just going to come out and say, oh, I'm racist, or I don't like black people, I don't like ethnic people, I don't like whatever. They're not going to come out and say they're prejudiced. Most people aren't going to say that. So they have to use other tactics, psychological warfare, the court systems, if you're ignorant to it, doing a little bit more research, and more awareness has been, brought to my attention of how they've specifically targeted people of color and kept them oppressed through varying, techniques and maneuvers. But I wanted to share something that I felt very, very interesting. So I said most people don't come out and say that they're racist. Well, I met this one gentleman, and he did tell me, and this white man, he told me to his face that he was racist. He felt people of color, genuinely, they took advantage of the system, etc. Minorities, whether you be Hispanic or black, didn't matter. He felt that we took advantage of the system. So the same gentleman, at a different date, while he's drunk, he attempts to, seduce me, pull me over somewhere in private so he could, make out with me, essentially. So I'm over here confused. When he first told me that, I was not in any way offended. I was like, oh, whatever, that's your opinion. That's how you perceive things. At that time, I was working two jobs and I was training to be a driving instructor, and all of my family members, immediate family, worked or was in college. And, my father served in the military, my mother worked, was able to retire. So to me, like, it didn't offend me one bit. I'm like, I don't care. I mean, that's what you think. That's what you think. That's not accurate, but whatever. It is what it is. So I find it interesting, though. Like, some people will flat out tell you these things, and then this history of, the treatment of women of color and enslavement, and you want to talk about black people's fetish. I don't know. The point I'm trying to make is, like, there are people who will be so bold and say things like that, and then there are people who will just use other tactics. So I've just come to the conclusion where you don't really know what to expect from people. If you go through the history of how they've treated people of color, like, a lot of people are a fan of Disney and Disneyland, and it's great. I love Disneyland. Yeah, it's great. But my question, though, is, has there been a black prince? And is anyone going to talk about what happened to Sunflower and Fantasia? Like, does anyone know who Sunflower is? I would encourage you to look up and see who Sunflower is in Fantasia. And also, like, there's a picture of Walt Disney and one of his composers, and they've got this half human, half zebra character, and it's a black woman, and she's topless. And I'm like, why is this figurine on their piano? I don't understand. Like, you won't have any representation of people of color in your films for a long time, but you definitely find... Anyways, let's go back on topic, though, specifically about the workforce and why it matters. So the point is, though, you can't tell who's racist, who's not. Most people aren't going to come to your face and tell you. If they did, does it really matter at the end of the day? Are you secure in your identity, in your purpose, in your lineage, in your family history? Like, do you know your identity? Can you sustain who you are despite the ill treatment that you're getting from people? That's the question, that's the argument. Can we support one another? Because even within the black communities, there's still in-house fighting, there's issues. So the point that I'm trying to make now is, like, if we cannot find unity within the races, within our own selves, what does professionalism look like when it comes time for the business sector? Who are you trying to support and why? And it just ultimately boils down to your identity and you knowing who you are, staying true to yourself, having your self-esteem, your character well established. That needs to be addressed first and foremost before anything else. So there's a lot to say on this issue, and I've just come to the conclusion I really don't know what to say. Like, everything is so fractured and there's so many issues surrounding this. So let's continue on, though, and get to the main point. So we know about the Proverbs 31 woman, a virtuous woman. It's very, very famous, quoted from the Bible. It's one of the last chapters in the book of Proverbs, talking about this virtuous, godly woman who takes care of her family. She makes things and she sells it at the marketplace. Her worth is more than rubies, all this good stuff. Like, very, very valuable. And this is, I guess, the ideal woman, the ideal, circumstances where you've got a husband who provides, but the woman is still able to work and make money and is very, very respected amongst the community, amongst society. So that's the ideal. But then you also have the circumstances where you have single mothers working, their children in the care of other people, or then you have mothers who are working, whether it's from prostitution to making preserves and everything else in between. Nurses, CNAs, medical field, janitorial, maid service, housekeeping, landscaping work, office work, secretarial, administrative assistants. You've got professionals, attorneys, doctors, different reasons, different types of fields, different types of jobs. But the point here, though, if you're not one of those Proverbs 31 wives, where you are able to get support from your spouse and continue working and supporting your family and bringing in income. If you don't have those afforded to you, the question I have to ask is, where are the men? This is another group that needs to be, supported, not only the black community, but also the women out there. And I have very, very strong conservative roots, but I'm also obviously very sympathetic to the needs of the minorities and the people on the fringes of society. So I guess you could call the term, blue dog, which is a conservative Democrat. I guess that would be if you want to, I put a label of my political ideology. So yeah, she's a blue dog. But I'm also very, very religiously conservative as well. So this stems a little bit deeper than just, I want to bring awareness to all these issues, in the political spectrum, leading Democrat / conservative. It goes deeper. So I wanted to bring awareness to women's issues. The ideal circumstance would be a woman who's married with a supporting, loving husband and can work and maintain the household and the children and make money and be productive member of society. I guess that would be the ideal. But that's not the case. So the question is, where are the men? What happened to the men? So the Industrial Revolution and reversing the damage. If you guys aren't familiar with that, I have a couple of links attached to the blog, and I'll try to put them onto the YouTube video as well. So is it possible to accomplish the American dream? And what does the American dream look like for you and for your family dynamic? So this is how I'm going to try to bring everything together. I don't have any solutions to the issues of racism. You really don't know who's really racist or not. And ultimately my thing is, do we care? Should we care? I mean, there's been lots of damage done to families, a lot of injustice and things that need to be corrected. There's a lot of problems. So how do we move forward past all that? There's a lot of hurt and heartache. There's some things that you can't get back. Your children, time wasted, falsely incarcerated, children mistreated by the system, victims not getting their justice. It goes pretty deep. This isn't just within the black community. We're also talking about things that happen to women, why they are single, why the man left, lots of injustice. So the question now is, moving forward, how do we heal the damage and pursue this thing called the American dream? Well, first we need to identify where some of these problems stem from. And I don't know if you're aware of the infamous Unabomber and his manifesto talking about the Industrial Revolution, the consequences. So we know that we absolutely love our things, mass production from factories, the commercialism and materialism aspect of it. You can pretty much get whatever you want whenever you want. You can hop on Amazon and have something delivered to your house the very next day. Lots of conveniences. Technology's great. I'm using a cell phone. We've got Wi-Fi. We can connect. So there's lots of positives and pros, but we need to also dissect all the negatives. So pollution is one issue, but that's not even the biggest problem. Initially, they started removing fathers from the household to go work in factories. They used to be tradesmen or craftsmen. You would go to the butcher, the blacksmith, the carpenter, you would go to your mechanic, and oftentimes they would work from home. The fathers would. The children were able to see what the father did, and the mom was there, and then next thing you know, they got the urbanization, people are moving to the big cities, and lots of factory jobs. And that just is just the beginning of the process. So after men are removed from their homes to work in factories, there's also wars we had to take into account. So that is where women enter the workforce. And unfortunately, there's always a history of men mistreating women. So that's going to be a reoccurring theme. But the thing is, though, some women didn't have a choice, they had to go to work. And now we've come to a point where it's just pretty much expected that women work. So not only, initially we see fathers leaving the household, children aren't connecting with what fathers do. Mothers are leaving the household to go to work. So children are being raised by school teachers, caregivers, and the television, getting a lot of information from TV, and this continues with the whole over consumerism. You're watching commercials, you're getting ads thrust at you, you're being convinced to purchase things you don't really necessarily need, or you didn't even know you needed until you saw the commercial. So it gets pretty deep. So I have a couple of links here attached to this about the dangers and the problems with technology and the overconsumption of things and the damage it does to the environment. There's some information out there if you want to check it out. They're doing much better. Amazon, they've got more facilities now where they have places to send items that are returned. There was a lot of backup from the pandemic that took place, so a lot of warehouses across the country, all the cargo ships that were out there that couldn't, bring in their products, now they're being resold and distributed in different places in other communities. But for a time period, though, a lot of the things were just essentially thrown away. Landfills were getting piled with things, perfectly good merchandise getting tossed. And we're seeing, a surplus of things. People are, taking it all in, but not really taking into account how life was before they had all the mass production, without all the factories, things being, pumped out rapidly. People used to sew their own clothing. If there was something damaged, they wouldn't just toss it. They would they would repair it. They would recycle and reuse everything. Glass bottles were recycled. They didn't have any plastic. There was no need for recycling, as in like having to take your bottles and cans and take it in. You would just keep the items and reuse them over and over, or have someone pick it up with something sanitized and clean. So all of this, again, just barely touching the surface, is how deep this goes and how much it's affected and changed our lives. So if you have time, I highly encourage you to look into the Industrial Revolution and the consequences and the effects it has, not just the environmental or financial, but definitely the psychological ramifications. If you want to get into the concept of architectural oppression and how they've disenfranchised people of color, the government overreach, the incentives of giving supplemental support and income to families, but to those without fathers, or they're sending men to work jobs away from the home, again, breaking up and dismantling the family structure. All of this is related. So we talk about the issues within Black communities and how they weren't given an opportunity. This is how it's all related to the issues of the workforce and business. We have to trace back to the history. Some of it was intentional. Architectural oppression also needs to be considered with the environmental aspect. If you don't see potential, if you don't see opportunity, if you're just looking at buildings and you're listening to cars and traffic and you're getting constant exposure to the exhaust from fumes, it affects your mental health. They've done studies about Alzheimer's patients and people who live out in the country with green pastures or green grass, and they're looking at green things, versus someone who's spent most of their time in the inner city. Those are the people, those who spend more time in the inner city have a higher rate of Alzheimer's versus those who live out in the fresh air. So when Kanye West makes that song, he talks about wanting his 40 acres, or the 40 acres. This is actually a really good reason why to demand that. We were supposed to be able to spread out and have land and have your own, piece of the pie, essentially. You're supposed to grow your own food and not be dependent on the government telling you what to do. Another reason why I didn't support the Crown Act initially was, I'm like, okay, why are we running to the government for our problems? Like, we need to be able to be self-sustainable and not rely on them, because the history shows that they've taken advantage of people of color And this is just another example right here. Instead of being able to stand on your own and know your identity, your family heritage, your roots, who you stand for, and not worry about who's racist and who's not. This is where we have the opportunity now to say, okay, you know what? I don't need to rely on you. I'm going to take care of my family. I'm going to take my freedom back. We need the fathers back in the household. Another issue, again, barely touching the surface, but definitely need fathers back in the homes. And talking about the industrialization of our country, that's part of the issue. Again, just barely touching the surface. So let's continue on, though. I'm not trying to spend too much time on this subject because we could easily spend hours on each talking point. How do we fix this? Are there any ways to remedy this problem? Well, absolutely. With technology, as bad as it can be, there's also the positives. There's the internet and internet business and marketing and being able to create sources of income and support your family and your household without fathers having to leave, without mothers having to leave. I joked once upon a time about, turn your home into a museum. If you're a traveler, if you used to be in the military, if you have a nice extensive collection, if you've lived in other countries and you want to display your artwork, if you have a collection of things, you could rotate your inventory. Like, people like to talk about, like being a pack rat or a hoarder. It's like, I just call it, you just have a factory or you have a warehouse that you need to organize. If you have a stockpile of things, hire an organizer, helps, find someone that can help you get your things put together and display what you have, your artwork, your collections. Consider opening up a shop. You need to get in touch with the Small Business Administration, learn how to get an LLC, learn what type of codes that you need to, or standards you need to live up to, or whatever it is. Find a way to turn your home possibly into a business. Consider getting, starting a restaurant. Do you like to make a particular item? Do you make the best cookies in the world? Do you make the best pie in the world? Do you make the best beverages? Open up your own little taco, place. You can set your own hours. Use online sources to do your marketing, and say, hey, every Tuesday we do tacos at our house, get a food handler's card, get your permits, do what you have to do, and, start a business from your own house. Do you make clothing? What are some of your hobbies and talents? Do you make music? Because you get together and actually, find a way to make money helping people make jingles or music for some type of organization, or bring awareness to support a group through your musical talent. Because, like, I personally don't have any talent in music very much, so I would definitely benefit from someone who can make music original. So there's the online stores like Shopify. There's a lot of online coaches too, and support groups, and like really help you get into your mind and get all the thoughts out and allow you to think creatively and find ways to make money with your talents. So it's just a couple of solutions. There's so much more, and I don't want to talk too long, but I just wanted to share some ideas for our business and tech talks discussions today. Really delving deeper into the history. I know there's so many different aspects and angles. I understand that people of the Anglo-Saxon, the Irish descent, people from the Netherlands, Europeans, you have or even South Africa, people of the lighter tone, you all have your own personal struggles within your demographic group. There's always in-house fighting within people of the same flesh tone, and I realize that there's mass suicides within the average white man in flyover states, the opioid crisis. There's lots of problems going on within each demographic group. So I'm not trying to be insensitive or not address those issues. So this is why I come to the conclusion most times when it comes time for race. I personally, I don't want to say I don't care, but There's just so many issues on top of issues on top of issues that it's like you can't care. Like, you just focus on your family and get your family back, is what my argument is. Like, the American dream, they have really done a great job. I remember as a child growing up, and I've talked to other people too who weren't in the military, people who just stayed in the same town. And, the 90s kids, where it's like you didn't care about skin tone or race. You just were kids and you're just trying to play and hang out. And then when you grow up, that's what it's like. You know what? I wish I didn't know the history. I wish we could just kind of move forward and not stay stuck in the past. But it wasn't that long ago, and there's a lot of damage that's been done. So now it's, how do we fix this? And we learn our history, we accept the things that have happened, and we decide, hey, you know what? I want different for my family. And the fathers and the mothers need to be home raising their children together and finding sources of income and bringing it to their own families and to their own churches and to their own communities, and not rely on the government so much. Be able to grow your own food and exchange your resources and your goods. If you have a skill, a talent, a trade, you need to hone in on that and get with other people and support one another. So I hope that's made some sense. I know I'm kind of all over the place with these points, and it's not trying to cause any offense or be dismissive of anyone's plight, but just trying to be real. Like, there's a lot of issues here, and I think